Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. Today's solo flight special is being captained by Wright. Ground traffic control has moved us to the departure lane, and we will be taking off shortly. Please return all seat backs to their original position, and ensure that all tray tables are stowed in the locked and upright position. Now fasten your seat belts. Kick back, relax, and enjoy the show as we soar above the friendly airwaves in comfort and style. Once again, we thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is your captain speaking, and I would like to take this opportunity to personally welcome you to this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. We know you have a choice when it comes to your radio listening pleasure, and would like to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. What's more, we are confident that no other radio program or venue will fly you over the friendly airwaves in as much comfort and style, nor leave you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, quite like we can here at the Wright Flyer. Now that you're aboard, please be seated, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. We've taxied to the departure lane and are awaiting takeoff clearance from air traffic control. While they go through that mindless, bureaucratic red tape and regimentation, I'm going to go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist because there is a lot of news and information to get to before I may indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, what we have seen with the Obama administration in the aftermath of these horrific and terrible terrorist attacks in San Bernardino, California, is nothing short of amazing. The reason that I say that it is nothing short of amazing is the fact that anyone with a brain can see that this was Islamo-fascist terrorism that has been unleashed upon the innocent people of the United States. And furthermore, that Obama is going to double down on his attempts to not only bring in Syrian refugees, which have a proven track record, as can be seen from the terror attacks in Paris a little over 2 weeks ago, of engaging in this sort of thing. But not only that, but also to double down on his unconstitutional attempts to strip average, decent, law-abiding American citizens of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. He is purposefully obfuscating what the real danger facing the United States of America is right now, and he's trying to place the blame squarely on our right to defend ourselves, our right to keep and bear firearms, and he also is trying to label those who disagree with his ludicrous Syrian so-called refugee resettlement program as being afraid of widows and orphans. Well, let's stop and think about this for a moment. When you actually look at the wife of Saeed Farouk, Tashfeen Malik, she was a foreign national from one of these Islamic countries who clearly did not want to assimilate to Western culture and society. And despite what those attorneys, and I even hesitate to call them attorneys because they were making untrue statements to the press and making outrageous claims, which I believe is a violation of their oath of office as an attorney, say she was aligned with ISIS. She went out on Facebook and pledged her allegiance to ISIS. We cannot deny these facts, but that's exactly what the president is doing. That's exactly what these radical hardliner left-wing extremists are doing, and it is diametrically opposed to the American people, detrimental to their safety and well-being, and it is only going to make matters worse. Folks, when you have a president who cannot properly come out and identify who the enemies are of the United States, despite the fact that these enemies have come out and vowed that they are at war with the United States, you have a dangerous situation. It is clear that President Obama is delusional, and if not delusional, then he is corroborating and collaborating with ISIS and these other Islamo-fascists who want nothing short than the absolute annihilation and destruction of the United States. But not just the United States. They want to destroy all of Western civilization. We cannot now bow down to this foolish and cancerous doctrine of political correctness that has put all of us at significant risk of harm and danger. We are smarter than that. Yet, when you look at the political elites who are holding the reins of power in Washington, D.C., they are obviously not operating for the interests of the American people. And that is certainly true with respect to Obama and his minions. You know, in the face of these sworn Islamo-fascists coming out and celebrating the death of American citizens, and, you know, it must be noted that this is the worst terror attack on American soil since 9/11, and then you have the acting Attorney General come out and say that she will prosecute Americans who say anti-Muslim things if that would somehow bring about violence. That is borderline insane. No, it's not just borderline insane, it is the epitome of insanity. Because as we all know, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibits the government from encroaching upon our right to free speech. Now, the way they may try and get around this to actually implement these insane machinations of Attorney General Loretta Lynch is to claim that it is the fire in a crowded theater exception. Well, the problem with that is that it would be knowingly false saying that. You can yell fire in a crowded theater if there is an actual danger. If there is an actual fire, there has been no crime committed. And let's face it, folks, when we look at the globe, spin it anywhere you want, you will find that most of the trouble spots in the world are related to some sort of Islamo-fascist activity. And therefore, what these people are saying is the truth. And to go after someone for speaking the truth and for exercising their free speech right is tantamount to totalitarianism, to despotism, to everything that our founding fathers fought so hard to break away from over 200 years ago. But that is clearly not what is appreciated by the current political powers that be with respect to this regime. They want to double down on their efforts to destroy our fundamental and unalienable rights. And what Loretta Lynch said is just absolutely, totally shocking, unacceptable, and un-American. We can no longer tolerate this sort of insanity within the auspices of government here in the United States of America. We are, after all, the land of the free, but it is fast turning away from that when we have governmental officers and employees and agents going out to subvert, encroach, and belittle the fundamental and unalienable rights of the people. Folks, if you thought that they were going to stop just with the Second Amendment right in attempting to besmirch and belittle it and ultimately strip it away from the decent, law-abiding citizens who are the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in the United States of America, then you have been dreaming. The proof is here. It is clearly evident that she came out and said that she would prosecute those who might offend Muslims.
This is a country that is based on free speech, but when it edges towards violence, when we see the potential for someone lifting that mantle of anti-Muslim rhetoric, or as we saw after 9/11, violence directed at individuals who may not even be Muslims, but may be perceived to be Muslims, and they will suffer just as well.
As you can see, folks, there is no question about what the Attorney General was attempting to say there. She is attempting to strip you of your fundamental and unalienable right to free speech because it might offend some Muslims. See, they don't care about protecting the lives of decent, hardworking American citizens. They would rather protect the Muslims who are apparently offended by our free speech and our ability to act for ourselves, to think for ourselves, and to care for ourselves. Well, that is intolerable and unacceptable. How is it that in this day and age that we would bend over backwards for those that adhere to a medieval ideology that has no place in any modern civilized society? They want to sit there and say that the Republicans are engaging in a war on women. What about the fact that these Islamo-fascists don't even want their women to drive? In fact, the terrorist Saeed Farouk's wife, Tashfeen Malik, had actually refused to even learn how to drive because it was not the proper place of a woman to drive a vehicle according to her so-called traditional Islamic outlook. That is the type of people that we are fighting, and yet the political powers that be want to just hand everything over to these people and to prosecute us if we offend them. You see, it is totally backwards from the way that things are actually supposed to work in this country with respect to this administration. They're not standing up for us at all. In fact, they want to punish us at every turn and corner. And this is especially true when it comes to the fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. President Obama once again dedicated his weekly radio address to pushing for even stricter gun control. In other words, disarming the American people of the very right that they could utilize to defend themselves against these Islamo-fascists who are hell-bent on ruining us, killing us, murdering us, and somehow claim that that would make America safer. In fact, Obama actually came out and said that the Second Amendment causes gun violence. You cannot make this stuff up, folks. You know, it's like how he came out when the violence was still playing out from that horrific terrorist attack in San Bernardino, California, and said that we have an undeniable pattern of gun violence unparalleled to anywhere else on earth here in America. That is disingenuous. Everything about the position that the president and his regime has taken in response to this terrorist attack in San Bernardino has been diametrically opposed to the truth. The president is not only being deceitful about all of this, he's delusional. He doesn't believe that Islamo-fascists actually present a threat to the United States. And he even came out and said that ISIS does not pose any existential threat to the United States. Clearly they do. Clearly Malik came out and swore allegiance to ISIS. There's no question about what she did, what she said, despite what those lunatics of family attorneys for the Farouk family and Malik family came out to say. We have seen the truth. And there is this undeniable pattern with respect to terrorist attacks throughout the world. And the worst terrorist attacks in the United States have all been orchestrated, carried out by, planned by, and ultimately delivered by Islamo-fascist terrorists. And as long as we keep denying this, we are going to continue to put our people at significant risk. But it gets worse than that. Now the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, has also come out and said that she's going to investigate that the arrest of that boy who had essentially made a bomb without the explosives and called it a clock. She's going to go out and investigate that arrest. So once again, they are second-guessing our law enforcement officers here in this country, which is another undeniable pattern with respect to the Obama regime that has been detrimental to the country at large. They are purposefully tearing down the first responders in this country in order to push forward their radical and extremist left-wing agenda. And it is well past time that this sort of radical behavior comes to a swift and immediate end. We, the American people, the ultimate wielders of sovereignty here in the United States, should not tolerate this for one iota longer. Because what they are doing is tearing this country apart at the seams. And that they actually are jubilant over this attempt to attack American culture and society. And whenever it comes to the surface that this horrific attack, and no one is denying that what occurred at San Bernardino, California was horrific, but they deny that it's Islamofascism. Again, they want to blame it on our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. Folks, there is a major disconnect here, and it's disconcerting to see this president and his regime approach it in the fashion that they have been. And for Obama to essentially blame the Second Amendment, which is contained within the Bill of Rights, and thereby is part of our shared United States Constitution, for gun violence in this country, is not only intellectually disingenuous, I would say that it is tantamount to being completely un-American and to be against the law. And the reason I say this is because he is working in such a way, threatening to use extra constitutional methods, such as an erroneous type of executive action, to attempt to strip away a constitutional right. And the reason that he's doing that is he knows for a fact that he does not have the support to actually amend the Constitution to take away the Second Amendment right to keep and bear firearms. And, you know, folks, that is the best example that I can think of for this is the 18th Amendment prohibition of the sale and purchase of intoxicating beverages here in the United States. They amended that to take away the ability of the American people to drink. And of course, the way that that was overturned was the 21st Amendment to the United States Constitution. And that is exactly how the Obama administration would have to go with respect to being in the confines of legality to take away the Second Amendment. But we know they're not going to do that, because Article 5 of the United States Constitution sets a very strict process and procedure which the government must abide by, and which I am confident that they do not and will not have the numbers to get, because it would require approval by 2/3 of the 50 states, of all the several states, to to ratify that amendment, thereby making it an official part of the United States Constitution. And I don't see the support for it, because especially when you look at what it is that's happening, we have this bifurcated viewpoint of what the real cause of the problem is here. And for the radical extremist left-wingers who think that global warming has somehow caused the rise of Islamofascist terrorism, it's guns. But actually, in reality, for those of us who are sane and rational, the only thing that is the common denominator with all of these Islamofascist terrorists and their attacks is this Islamic view from the Middle Ages that they have committed themselves to. This point of view that they will create a global caliphate, an empire that stretches across the world, forcing everyone to bend at the knee and bow at the altar of the false moon god Allah. We cannot deny that that is a part of their strategy. That is how they think, and that is exactly what they want. But instead, we're going to bend over backwards to help these barbarians and savages due to the cancerous doctrine of political correctness. Folks, I cannot more emphatically say that what we are facing in this country is a perfect storm of radical left-wing ideology and cancerous doctrines that are putting us in grave danger. And it's horrific when you stop and think about it, because the President of the United States is supposed to serve the people. He is the highest office in the land, meaning that he is the highest ranking servant of the people. Because in this country, the ultimate wielders of sovereignty is we, the people of the United States. But that is not what we are seeing with respect to this regime. We see that he holds the people in contempt. And with those contemptuous remarks that he made about those who don't want to allow his so-called Syrian refugee resettlement program to continue, you can just hear the poison and venom dripping off his lips when he speaks about it.
When candidates say we wouldn't admit 3-year-old orphans, that's political posturing. We should have a religious test, and that only Christians, proven Christians, should be admitted. That's offensive and contrary to American values.
No, Mr. President, what is really offensive is that you don't want to stand up for the American people, that you want to expose them to these risks, that you purposefully obfuscate the actual risk. And these so-called widows and orphans are not the main problem, although we can clearly see with Tashfeen Malik that the women are capable of being terrorists too. In fact, there are questions as to whether she was actually the one who supposedly radicalized, and that's the term that they use, her husband, Saeed Farouk, because everyone in the United States once again claims that he was, you know, just this average, ordinary person, that he had no background of violence and treachery. Well, no. He probably kept it under the radar, but it is clear from what he did at San Bernardino, California, that he bought into the Islamo-fascist line, hook, line, and sinker. And to deny that, and to not even come out and say word one about it, as the president has, is not only intellectually disingenuous, it is horrible, absolutely horrible. And for him to sit there and say that it would only be Christians that we allow in, no. We want there to be a process to vet them so that we know for a fact whether they would pose a significant risk of harm to decent, law-abiding American citizens. Because as it stands right now, we have no way of vetting them, and when we don't vet them, we open ourselves and expose ourselves to increased risk for such devastating attacks as what occurred in San Bernardino, California. Instead of focusing on the fundamental and unalienable right of the people to keep and bear firearms, as you have been, Mr. President, maybe you ought to actually focus upon securing the borders in the United States, rolling back your so-called Syrian refugee resettlement program, and listen to the will of the people. I know that's a very difficult thing for you because you absolutely loathe and despise the American people, but we are to the point now where your radical agenda has killed innocent American citizens, and that is intolerable and unacceptable. But we all know that the acolytes of the radical and extreme left-wing ideology will continue to bow at your altar of statism, will continue to attempt to strip decent, law-abiding American citizens of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms because they want to destabilize this country. They want to plunge this country into such chaos and misery that in a moment of desperation, that the American people will turn to the government and say, please come in and help us, make things right. But that is only the pathway to totalitarianism, despotism, and tyranny. It should not happen in this country. And I think that the American people are smart enough to see through your transparent sense of contempt for them and for your just unwavering commitment to a radical ideology that does nothing to make this country better off or to make the people safer. We in America have the greatest birthright of any people on the face of the earth, and that birthright is our inheritance, the Constitution of the United States. Yet you are doing everything in your power, Mr. President, to tear that sacred document apart. Why? Why do you loathe and hate the Constitution? Why do you loathe and hate the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this country, we the people? These are questions that should be answered, and these are the types of things that the now gutless opposition party ought to be saying, but you're not going to really hear it from them. You'll hear it from Ted Cruz, because he is absolutely right on. He actually cares about the the decent, hardworking American citizens that form the absolute quintessential backbone of this country. But you won't hear it from a John Kasich. You won't hear it from a Governor Krispy Kreme. You won't hear it from El Jefe Jeb Bush. He'll come out and say that we need to have war with radical Islam, as he puts it, but that we also need to give up our Fourth Amendment right just so that the NSA can snoop on us at any given time. The problem is, even with that information, they were unable to prevent the Chechnyan Mario brothers from carrying out their horrific attack on the Boston Marathon back in 2013. They even had warnings about the savage nature of the Tsarnaevs and the extremist things that they said, and yet they failed to act upon it, once again, because of this doctrine of political correctness. So why is it that once again the American people are called upon to surrender their civil liberties for a false, fleeting sense of security? That makes no sense to me, yet that has been the unequivocal pattern that we have faced since the major terrorist attacks of 9/11/2001. It has been an incremental process with things such as the Patriot Act and the way the TSA acts in the airports, stripping decent American citizens of their rights as they go through those metal detectors, get sexually harassed, get their things stolen, are told they can't bring liquids onto the airplanes. Well, how is that going to stop anything? Well, the fact of the matter is it isn't. As I pointed out on previous episodes of the Wright Flyer, they've even allowed guns and bombs to go through on security screening tests. So it's quite clear to see that actually the TSA hasn't done a lick of good for the American people. But once again, those that wield the reins of power here in the United States, those political elitists, the detentist, the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, people like Marxist Rubio are going to turn a blind eye to it, because they're going to sit there and say that the government needs all of that power, needs to work against the will of the American people. Well, that is intolerable and unacceptable. That is not the way that our founding fathers had envisioned this country being when they fought so hard to give birth to this country over 2 centuries ago. And again, this is why the revisionist history that is going on in our institutions of education and learning throughout this country has been so detrimental to the people, because they're not teaching our real history. They're not teaching our core values. They're not teaching what it is to be a civically responsible American citizen. And that too is dangerous. Again, instead of pointing to the Islamo-fascist ideology that is posing the significant threat to us here in the United States, the president says this in his weekly radio address.
Another tragic reminder that here in America, it's way too easy for dangerous people to get their hands on a gun. For example, right now, people on the no-fly list can walk into a store and buy a gun.
What a bunch of malarkey. First of all, Tashfeen Malik was allowed into the country despite the security screenings. They cleared her. So she was on no-flight list. And her husband wasn't on any no-flight list. So again, this is pushing for more of these failed policies that actually don't stop to make us any safer. They're just encroaching upon decent, law-abiding citizens' ability to keep and bear firearms. And let's not even forget the fact that there are a lot of false positives on the no-fly list, and it's already to where if you are suspected of that, you can't get a firearm. So why is it that he wants to double down on punishing the American citizen instead of actually going after those who pose a significant and real threat to the American citizenry? It is highly, highly suspicious that he would do this and not come out and say that it is Islamofascism that is the threat here. Because let's face it, nothing we do, no law that we make would prevent Islamofascists from carrying out these attacks. You know, they were able to carry it out in France, which has strict anti-gun measures. And in fact, it only exacerbated the damage that was allowed to occur. It only made things worse. And it allowed the terrorists to wreak even more havoc than they would have otherwise. But that doesn't cross the president's mind, because the president cannot divorce himself from this twisted, radical, extremist, left-wing agenda. And that is intolerable and unacceptable. We as American citizens should not be called upon to surrender our fundamental and unalienable rights, particularly the fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. Because as Jeremy and I have oftentimes repeated, hell, even as our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, has oftentimes repeated on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, it is the Second Amendment which serves to protect and safeguard all of our other fundamental and unalienable rights. This is the truth that Obama will not speak of. This is what is a real danger. Yet Obama wants to move full steam ahead with his radical anti-gun agenda, irrespective of the fact that the courts have already decided that the Second Amendment is a fundamental and unalienable right, irrespective of the fact that Congress years ago had already stated what the purpose and intent of the Second Amendment is. This just goes to show that the president does not hold American values, that once again he is moving in a path that is diametrically opposed to the benefit, health, safety, and well-being of the American people. Think about it, folks. Every policy position assumed by this president has been against America. Look at Obamacare, the so-called Affordable Care Act, forcing people to buy something whether they need it or not. And as a result, we are now seeing premiums skyrocket. We're seeing the insurance industry fall apart at the seams. We're seeing healthcare become just incredibly less efficient than it used to be, and it was all because he had to have his way. In fact, the Democrats marched lockstep on that issue, and not a single Republican voted in favor of that bill. And look at the disastrous consequences it has had. So once again, Obama is gearing up to make a raid against our fundamental and unalienable rights, because once again this is an imperial president who does not care about the safety and well-being of the American people. Because if he really did, he would come out and make a loud stance, a vociferous, serious, and meaningful stance against these Islamofascists. So for the president to come out and make this false equivalency, to say that we should have it be that if you are on a no-fly list, you can't carry guns, that's just asinine. We already have background checks. We already have these strenuous regulations. And look, the place where this shooting occurred, California, already had everything on the checklist that the president wanted. Everything. And yet it did not prevent these attacks from occurring. That's the thing. All of these radical left-wing solutions, or so-called solutions, that are put forward by these utopian socialists do not work. They do not actually prevent those twisted people from carrying out their sociopathic machinations. But you know, the president won't even come out and say that the enemy that we face is Islamofascism, despite the fact that the Islamofascists have come out and declared war on us, despite the fact that this woman was already tweeting about, or not tweeting, but going on Facebook and saying that she aligns herself with al-Bakri and ISIS. That is all the proof we need to know that ISIS is active here in the United States poses a significant threat to the United States. And it once again proves that the president has been wrong each and every time with respect to what he has said about ISIS. Remember, they were the JV team. Remember, they couldn't pose a significant threat here in the United States. Remember, he said that they were contained, yet the Paris attacks have occurred, yet this horrific terrorist attack in San Bernardino, California occurred, and once again, what does he want to do? He wants to blame it on an inanimate object, a firearm, and he wants to say that our Second Amendment actually causes gun violence. He says that it needs to be changed. No, Mr. President, it does not need to be changed. What needs to change is your radical push to strip us of our fundamental, unalienable constitutional rights. Because as Jeremy and I have oftentimes reiterated here on previous episodes of the Wright Flyer, it is that our fundamental and unalienable rights are endowed to us by our Creator. Therefore, no rightful, legitimate, lawful government can take them away. So, President Obama, do you really, really want to go forward and make yourself even more illegitimate than you already are? Well, I know the answer to that rhetorical question. It's an astounding yes. You will use any tactic, and you will seize upon any tragedy to once again push forward your radical extremist left-wing agenda. And those zombies that follow you, those zombies that still support you, will just stand in line and clap in the mindless fashion that they always do. But real, decent American people know exactly what it is you are doing. They see right through your radical and twisted agenda, and they will not tolerate any further erosions of their fundamental and unalienable rights. Because when you think about what it is that the president has been trying to do to each and every one of us, it is to destabilize our country, to make us less safe, and to empower those who are avowed enemies of everything that we stand for and represent, for everything that we hold near and dear. You have to keep that in mind when you look at everything that this president and his regime says. And think about it, folks. Why is it that Loretta Lynch, the acting attorney general for the United States of America, could go before the cameras of the salivating mainstream media and speak in such a contemptuous fashion to say that she would prosecute anyone who speaks about quote-unquote anti-Muslim rhetoric? Now, she tried to couch that with saying that only if it rose to the level of violence. I'm sorry, but the First Amendment is clear that the right of the people to free speech shall not be infringed. You see, folks, this is the common denominator that you always get with the radical, extremist, utopian socialist left. They always want to run ramshod over your fundamental and unalienable rights. It's not just the Second Amendment. It's your First Amendment. It's your Fourth Amendment. It's your 5th, 6th, 8th, 10th, 15th, 14th Amendments. All of the amendments that defend you and protect you from governmental encroachment, they hate. Why? Because they think they are smarter than you. They think they know what's best for the country, and that you are too stupid to act for yourself, to defend yourself, to benefit yourself. But the fact of the matter is, the Supreme Court has already held that the police do not have a constitutional duty to protect you, and that it is your duty to protect yourself. And think about that, folks. That is significant, very significant. In fact, the Supreme Court handed that decision down in the 2005 case of Castle Rock v. Gonzalez. So I know that the president and the adherents to his radical extremist left-wing ideology would try and come out and say that, well, this is just us holding on to some antiquated 18th century notion. Well, no. This was a 2005 decision where the Supreme Court has already said that the police do not have a constitutional duty or obligation to protect the American people from harm. So stop and think about that. That means that the onus is on you, me, we, the people, the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in this country, to stand up for ourselves, to defend ourselves, and to protect ourselves. So pray tell, how do we do that if we strip ourselves of our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms? The answer is we don't. And while the radical and extremist left may be out there trying to say, well, no, this isn't about confiscation, it's just for those weapons you don't need. Well, the guns we supposedly don't need, the only difference between them is their appearance. A semi-automatic AK-47 will be no different than a semi-automatic equivalent 30 caliber rifle. Just an appearance. But they sit there and they try and obfuscate the truth, try to conflate these semi-automatic rifles into fully automatic rifles. And they do this with a complacent, salivating mainstream media that doesn't care about conveying the truth. They obviously don't report this in an objective fashion, because if you stop and remember, right as this was going on, before we learned who exactly it was that orchestrated and carried these attacks out, some in the mainstream media were trying to come out and blame this on quote-unquote radical right-wingers.
More people in this country have been shot by so-called right-wing extremists than by Islamic extremists. So
you see, folks, there's the mainstream media's radical agenda. There they are going out and blaming so-called right-wing extremists for this, saying that that's worse than Islamofascism. I mean, you know, if it weren't for their own words, it'd be hard to believe that anyone could be so callous or stupid as to say that. Yet that is exactly what we are seeing with this radical and extremist left-wing ideology that is being perpetrated by the so-called mainstream media. What it is clear to see from all of this is that these radical and extremist left-wingers are doing everything in their power to besmirch and belittle those who disagree with them. And based on the Attorney General's, you know, statement that she was going to come out and prosecute those for merely speaking against Islamofascists, it shows that they are going to do whatever they can to silence us, to disarm us, and to make us weak and vulnerable to their radical attempts to fundamentally transform this country. And we cannot and should not allow them to get away with this. Yet they are salivating because they think that they have the opportunity to do this. And yet every time that the narrative unravels for them, they continue to double down on their unrealistic utopian socialist agenda. And it is always at the expense of we the people, which is diametrically opposed to everything that is good and decent about this country. But they don't care. They simply don't care. The only thing that matters to them is their political agenda. And that's why President Obama came out after the Umpqua Community College shooting and said that we should politicize these issues.
So we know there are ways to prevent it. And of course, what's also routine is that somebody somewhere will comment and say, Obama politicized this issue. Well, this is something we should politicize.
That's right, folks. You had Obama right there saying that we should politicize tragedy, that we should politicize mass shootings, that we should move forward with his radical extremist left-wing ideology because it would be best for the country. No, we shouldn't politicize the fundamental natural law tenets that underpin our entire representative, federalist, Republican system of government. Because to do so is to go against the very fabric of who we are, to deny our shared national culture, heritage, history, and identity. But that's exactly what these radical and extremist left-wingers want. It's what they always push for. It's what they always keep churning up because they think that it is their duty and responsibility to destroy this country. But you you can sit there and ask me, well, why, Randy? Why would they want to destroy the United States of America? Because that is the root of utopian socialism and any of these radical extremist left-wing ideologies. In order to implement their insane, twisted, barbaric ideology, they have to tear down, strip apart that which came before. Everywhere that they have attempted to sink their claws into the body politique, they have always come out and attacked and destroyed what stood before. Look at the Cultural Revolution in Maoist China. They literally went out to destroy the symbols and physical evidence and records of China's illustrious past. And this might also help explain the great affinity that the radical extremist left wing seems to have for these Islamo-fascist terrorists, because when you look at what ISIS is doing in the Middle East, they run around unconstrained, destroying these beautiful ancient artifacts. Well, you can see the same thing, and I know I've said this before, but with respect to Confederate monuments and the Southern Cross battle flag. They don't respect history. They don't care for traditions. They don't care for the institutions of the past. If they did, then why would they push to deprive the voters of their right to have decided the issue in California and in all of the other states where they have defined marriage as between a man and a woman? No, they had to push again to tear down a traditional institution because, again, they have to destroy what came before in order to push forward their radical, twisted, and alien ideology and agenda, because it has no place in a free society. It has no place in the United States of America. And therefore, they see themselves at war with what is good and decent about the United States. And they will use any extra constitutional, unconstitutional method to get their way. It is what they have done for generations. You know, folks, this idea of a progressive movement that is diametrically opposed to the traditions and history of the country goes back to Theodore Roosevelt. He is the father of the American progressive movement, and he did whatever he could to exponentially expand the powers of the federal government at the expense of the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty in the United States, we the people. These are the facts that cannot be denied. This is the history that we cannot ignore. Yet, just as Obama is ignoring the actual threat and danger posed to this country by Islamo-fascist terrorists, the radical and extreme left is ignoring the fact that they are the ones who stand up against the true history of this country. And they double down on their efforts to teach revisionist history. And we have seen the detrimental consequences that result from that. Just look at all of this insanity that has been occurring on college campuses throughout the United States. This is an example of what the indoctrination of the radical and extreme left has done in this country. We're no longer educating students as to the truth. We have radicalized these students. We have pushed them to be afraid of costumes. Remember the Halloween costume story that happened at Columbia? Remember the firing of the University of Missouri's president because he just happened to be white? You know, that is the disgusting and bigoted point of view that the radical and extreme left has basically poisoned our institutions of higher learning with. But it's not just the institutions of higher learning. It's the media, and it's almost at every level of government. We are having to face these people and their destructive policies and everything that they have done in an attempt to redefine what it is to be an American citizen and what the United States of America should represent. And again, It's all within this twisted mindset that the government knows best, the people don't know what's good for them, and therefore any and all decision-making should be taken away from the people. But if you actually go back and look at the natural law tenets that underpin our entire constitutional system, you will find that the absolute wielders and the ultimate wielders of authority in this country are we, the people. Again, folks, this is why it is of the utmost importance that you have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and unalienable rights. Because you have to be able to stand up for yourself. You have to be able to defend yourself. You have to proactively maintain and safeguard your fundamental and unalienable rights. And that is the way this country was designed, and that explains why the radical and extreme left, who loathes and despises everything about what this country represents and what this country is about, are doing whatever they can to obfuscate that truth, to ensure that future generations don't learn the truth about who they are and what their country is about or how their country is to work. You know, it's why I get so angry when this erroneous term is thrown around that the United States of America is a democracy. This is a deep-seated, longly held, false statement about the United States. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutionally endowed representative republic. But again, this goes into the semantics that the radical and extreme left likes to play here in America. And not just here in America, but wherever they attempt to sink their claws into the body politics and seize the reins of political power. And they will stop at nothing to achieve their goal, to spread their power, to spread their influence, to secure their twisted machination, and also to ensure that their point of view is thrust against the people, irrespective of whether the people want it or not. And that's the thing. They always cover themselves in the shroud of being for the little guy, for caring for the people, but in actuality, they do not care. They do not care. If they did care, then they would be on the front line standing up and opposing those Islamo-fascists who have sworn to kill and annihilate America, to destroy our constitutional system of government, to deprive each and every one of us of our fundamental and unalienable rights. I think that a part of it is that they selfishly and stupidly believe that they can control these Islamo-fascists, and that they can use these Islamo-fascists to deprive us of our fundamental and unalienable rights at a faster rate than they could do on their own. You know, even though they go by the name of progressive, which means that they take these small incremental steps towards their utopian socialist goal and agenda, they have grown impatient. They have held the reins of power in this country since January of 2009. And their president was elected, supposedly, to a second term. Yet, he's not moving fast enough for the most rabid amongst them. And therefore, they want to further overwhelm the system, to push this ideology that would force the country into chaos, so that then they could spring their utopian socialist trap upon us. Folks, this is clearly the Cloward-Priven principle. This was brought up by some Marxist professors back in the mid-20th century as a design to completely overwhelm all of the systems of the United States so that the people would fall at the altar of statism, begging the government to come in and take control of everything. If you stop and think about that, that is truly a dark, twisted, and bullheaded ideology. It is an ideology that does not respect the humanity of individuals. It is an ideology that clearly does not respect human decency or the individual's capacity to think for themselves, and it is completely and totally diametrically opposed to the fundamental principles, those natural law tenets that underpin our shared United States Constitution. Yet this is what we are facing here in the United States of America today, folks. We are facing a revigorated Marxist ideology and movement that is hell-bent on forcing through their ideology, their goals, their plans, irrespective of the damage, danger, or harm that it presents to the ultimate wielders of sovereignty in the United States, we the people. This is a reality that we cannot ignore. It is a reality that we must address, and it must be shown to the world just who these people are and what they are trying to do. Because if you stop and think about it, the way that we would solve any of these problems that are currently facing the country is to return to strict adherence to the fundamental natural law tenets contained within the Constitution. That is the way that we return the United States to prosperity. That is the way that we defeat these Islamo-fascist barbarians like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. But when you look at the way the president has been handling any of the so-called crises or crises in the Middle East, he has done nothing but strengthen those who have vowed to destroy the United States of America. It reminds me of that image that I saw, that infamous image that I saw back when he was on his apology tour, where he bowed to the king of Saudi Arabia. Folks, is that really the type of image that should be shown to the world by the leader of the free world? I say no. And certainly his questionable response to this terrorist attack, even after it has been clearly shown that this was Islamo-fascist terrorism, once again brings his allegiance into question. But we've known that all along. We have known where his heart stands with respect to the United States. After all, he is the one that said back in 2008 that he wanted to fundamentally transform the United States of America. We cannot deny these truths. And the truth is out there, because everywhere you look, the message that he tries to put forth and the agenda that he tries to put forth is unraveling. And you need to take a step back and ask yourself, are you really better off now under the tenure of Barack Hussein Obama than you were before? I am going to go ahead and probably say that I know the answer is no. I'm not better off. No one I know is better off. And if you are a true liberty-loving American, then you know you are not better off because of the sociopathic and twisted machinations of this man who holds the office of President of the United States. And if we would think that handing the reins over to Hillary Clinton in 2016 would be an improvement, no. Because she was the one that came out in the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 2012 terrorist attack in Benghazi that killed Ambassador Chris Stevens, the first sitting United States ambassador to be killed since 1979, and blame it on a video, a non-existent video, or if the video existed, that was not the cause or the root cause of why these Islamo-fascists were out there attacking him. But the question is, what was he doing in Benghazi? Why was he there? Again, these are things that we have no official answer to, and the regime continues to obfuscate, to shuck and jive with respect to it, because they don't want the truth to come to light. Because odds are there is something behind the claims of a lot of the Iraqis that they have seen American forces arming ISIS. I don't believe that our soldiers would do this per se, but certainly governmental entities who are loyal to the Obama regime might. And again, we now have Vladimir Putin saying that the United States has been helping ISIS to obtain oil. Well, there may be something to that due to the type of silence that we're seeing with respect to President Obama when it comes to blatant, undeniable acts of terrorism that have occurred here in the United States, such as what happened at San Bernardino this last week. But again, nobody in the Obama administration wants to say that. They don't want the truth to come out, and as a result, the United States looks as weak and as feckless as ever. And this whole notion, this oxymoron notion of leading from behind, that too is just insane. It shows that this president doesn't care about the United States, that his entire agenda is centered around this idea of doing whatever it takes to weaken the United States, so long as his radical and twisted extremist left-wing agenda is pushed forward. But folks, that is not the history of this country, because it doesn't fit the ideology of our people. It doesn't fit the identity of our people. This is a foreign ideology. This is a radical extremist left-wing ideology that is putting each and every one of us at significant risk of harm and death if we fail to respond to it. And you can see with his attempts to double down on our fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms that Obama is once again focusing on the wrong issues. He's been wrong on ISIS every time that he has opened his mouth with respect to them. He has been wrong about Islamo-fascist terrorism every time he's spoken about it. Folks, remember, when the Benghazi attack had happened, Vice President Joe Biden was on the campaign trail speaking in front of the cameras of the salivating mainstream media saying that GM was alive and that Al-Qaeda was dead. Well, even if Al-Qaeda was dead, which they're not, clearly, ISIS was rising. But Obama was going to just sit there and say that they were the JV team, the junior varsity. Well, the junior varsity has struck and killed American citizens. Even after Obama said that ISIS posed no existential threat to the United States, again, ISIS struck, and the president has blood on his hands. But instead of addressing the real problem, Obama once again veers right back to his radical extremist left-wing agenda, which is to deprive decent, law-abiding citizens of their fundamental and unalienable right to keep and bear firearms. Why is it that he is so obsessed with that? Well, I think that it comes down to this idea of he doesn't want the people to have the ability to stand up to him and his tyrannical ways. He doesn't want law-abiding citizens to be able to protect themselves because that might offend his Muslim friends. Because certainly he spoke with utmost contempt and outright contempt against those who wanted to put a stop to his resettlement program, which there can be no question would actually make us less safe. And especially when he is now refusing to release any of the immigration records with respect to this Tasfeen Malik, who came here on a K visa, what is known as a fiance visa. Why? Why did the so-called vetting, which Obama assures us that with respect to these so-called Syrian refugees, that they will be going through a strict vetting program and process, when in fact we know that we don't even have decent enough databases to do that, would he refuse to release this? I want to see what the government missed. I want to see how they could have prevented a Tasfeen Malik from coming into this country and thereby prevent a terrorist attack like that happening at San Bernardino. But, you know, this is the same radical and extreme leftists who sit there and try and say that global warming, this man-made global warming, you know, this hoax caused terrorism. And again, I just have to turn to the words of Senator Burn Me Sanders.
That climate change, in fact, is related to terrorism. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, that's not only my observation, John. That is what the CIA and the Department of Defense tells us. And the reason is pretty obvious. If we are going to see an increase in drought and flooding and extreme weather disturbances as a result of climate change, what that means is that peoples all over the world are going to be fighting over limited natural resources.
So again, he's trying to say that this is competing over limited natural resources. Is that really what made Tashfeen Malik and the American-born Saeed Farouk carry out these dastardly attacks in San Bernardino, California? I think we all know that the answer is an unequivocal no, that it is an undeniable no. We know for a fact that it is Islamofascism that inspired them, that this caliphate just wants to create a medieval ideology. It would be one thing if there was actually any solid, concrete evidence that drought was causing this. But there isn't, because these people have been doing this for thousands of years. And they're trying to say that global warming is something that only happened within the last century or so, because of carbon fuels or whatever. Of course, it is all just a bunch of malarkey. And it also goes to show you just how detached from reality these utopian socialists really are. So while we are at greater danger than we have been in our entire history, these people don't want to go and point the finger at those who have really gone out of their way to harm the United States. In fact, they want to prosecute us, as you recall, for speaking out against this, for pointing out the truth. This is what you have when Islamofascism and utopian socialism fascism take root. So, again, it is important that you have a fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution, and thereby your fundamental and unalienable rights, so that you can stand up to these people, so that you can tell them no, so that you can defend yourself. That is the most important message that Jeremy and I can deliver to you here on the Wright Flyer. And we hope that it reaches you and empowers you, because that is what it is designed to do. It is designed to empower you, because these people are trying to push you down. These people are trying to belittle you. These people are trying to defeat you. But that is not what we are about here at the Wright Flyer. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to send the flight attendant back with one last round of alcohol as we begin our descent. I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for choosing to fly with us here at the Wright Flyer. Once again, this is your captain speaking, Randy Wright, and I invite you to leave any comments, posts, or concerns either here on our YouTube page or on our Facebook page or our Google Plus page. Thank you again for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We look forward to seeing you the next time that Jeremy and I hit the friendly airwaves and fly you over those airwaves, leaving you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment. We will see you next time. Oh, and also, Merry Christmas, folks. I know we are now in the Christmas season, so let me go ahead and anger some radical extremist left-wingers there by wishing you a Merry Christmas. See you next time.